Taran Kout Forward Operating Base, Afghanistan, 2010. The temperature hit 43 degrees Celsius and the dust never settled. A U.S. Army colonel walked into the Australian compound carrying 25 years of service, hundreds of soldiers under his command, and the absolute certainty that his rank meant something. He was about to learn otherwise. The coordination meeting was already underway when he arrived. Australian officers sat around the tactical map, majors and captains in their standard multicam, taking notes and nodding at appropriate intervals. But the colonel's eyes kept drifting to the corner of the room where a single figure stood in silence, 3 chevrons and a crown on his sleeve. A warrant officer. Not an officer at all by American standards, just a very senior enlisted man who should be taking orders, not giving them. The colonel laid out his operational plan with practiced confidence. The insertion points were marked, the timing sequences were clear, the support elements were positioned exactly where doctrine demanded. He had planned hundreds of missions just like this one. The Australian major listened politely. The captains scribbled coordinates onto their notepads. Everything proceeded exactly as it should, until the warrant officer in the corner spoke for the first time. That plan will not work. The room went silent in a way that made the colonel's skin prickle. Every Australian in the tent had stopped moving. The warrant officer had not raised his voice. He had not stood up. He had simply stated a fact with the same inflection someone might use to mention the weather. The colonel felt heat rising in his collar that had nothing to do with the Afghan sun. "Excuse me?" The warrant officer stepped forward to the map and began pointing at the insertion coordinates with one calloused finger. "Your insertion point is wrong. Your timing is wrong. Your support plan is inadequate. If you run this operation as planned, you will lose people." The colonel had commanded troops in Iraq, had coordinated battalion-level operations across 3 provinces, had earned his rank through 2 decades of increasingly complex leadership positions. He knew what he was doing. "I have planned hundreds of operations. I know what I am doing." The warrant officer looked at him with eyes that had seen things the colonel could only read about in after-action reports. "I have been doing this for 23 years. I have conducted this specific type of raid 47 times. You are about to do it for the first time. Your plan will get people eliminated." The colonel turned to the Australian major with disbelief radiating from every pore. "Are you going to let your NCO talk to me like this?" The major's response came without hesitation. "He is not an NCO, sir. He is a warrant officer. And if he says the plan will not work, the plan will not work. I would suggest you listen." The colonel looked around the room, searching for support, and found none. Every single Australian was nodding in agreement with the warrant officer. A man who, by American standards, should be somewhere organizing equipment checks or reviewing maintenance schedules, had just contradicted a field-grade officer in front of his entire staff, and nobody seemed to think this was unusual. 48 hours later, the operation launched with modifications. The warrant officer's recommendations had been incorporated into every phase. The insertion point was moved 300 meters north to higher ground. The timing was staggered to account for the inevitable communications delays. The support elements were repositioned to provide overlapping fields of fire. Complete success, 0 casualties. Target captured alive and singing like a canary within 6 hours. The colonel sat in the debriefing tent afterward trying to process what had happened. "I outrank that warrant officer by 6 pay grades. I command 800 soldiers. He commands what? A dozen? But in that room, his word carried more weight than mine. Not because of rank, because of knowledge, because of experience, because everyone, including his own officers, deferred to him. In the U.S. military, that could not happen. A warrant officer contradicting a colonel? He would be relieved on the spot, probably court-martialed for insubordination, certainly never work in special operations again. But in SASR, the warrant officer is the operation. The officer's plan. The warrant officer executes. And if the warrant officer says no, the answer is no. It is not a rank structure. It is a priesthood, and the high priests are warrant officers. Welcome to the most powerful rank in the Australian military, where a man with no commission, no university degree, and no formal command authority can override generals. Where experience matters more than rank. Where the word warrant officer does not mean senior NCO, it means God among soldiers. This is the horror of the SASR warrant officer, not because they are evil, but because they wield power that should not exist in a modern military. And that power saved lives until it did not. Understanding this requires examining how rank structures work in normal military organizations. In the U.S. system, you have enlisted personnel starting as privates and working up through various grades of sergeant. Then you have warrant officers who are technical specialists, mostly helicopter pilots or intelligence analysts with expertise in narrow fields. They have authority over their specific domain, but no command authority over people. Then you have commissioned officers who went to university, attended officer candidate school, and carry legal authority to give orders and make strategic decisions. Lieutenants, captains, majors, colonels, generals. Authority flows downward in a clear chain. Australian conventional forces work the same way. Warrant officers are senior enlisted personnel with technical expertise and limited authority. They advise officers but do not overrule them. Standard military hierarchy that has worked for centuries. SASR operates under completely different rules. In SASR, the warrant officer is the highest operational authority in the unit, more influential than captains, equal to or greater than majors in operational matters, can override lieutenant colonels in field decisions, only answers to the squadron commander or higher, and even that relationship is more collaborative than hierarchical. This system comes directly from the British SAS, which was founded in 1941 by David Stirling. His key innovation was small teams led by experienced NCOs and warrant officers rather than fresh-faced officers straight out of military academy. Officers would plan strategy and provide resources. Warrant officers would execute operations and command in the field. The reason was simple. Small unit tactics require experience more than formal education. You cannot learn how to clear a building full of armed enemies from a textbook. You learn it by clearing 40 buildings and surviving every time. When Australia created SASR in 1957, they copied the British model exactly. 70 years later, that cultural inheritance remains unchanged. Warrant officers run operations. Officers run administration and strategy. This inverts the normal military hierarchy in ways that make conventional commanders deeply uncomfortable. The timeline to become an SASR warrant officer first class reveals why these men command such authority. You start by enlisting in the Australian Army as a private. You serve in regular infantry for 2 to 4 years minimum before you are even allowed to attempt SASR selection. You need to be an experienced soldier before they will consider you. Then comes selection. 21 days of hell in the mountains of Queensland. Physical torture, sleep deprivation, psychological warfare, constant assessment. The pass rate hovers between 5 and 10%. Most fail, most quit. If you somehow pass, you become a trooper, which is the SASR equivalent of private or corporal. Years 5 through 10 are spent as a junior operator. Multiple deployments to Timor, Iraq, Afghanistan. You progress through the ranks to lance corporal and corporal. This is the learning phase. Shut up, listen, execute. Watch the senior operators and try not to get anyone harmed. Years 10 through 15, you become a senior operator, sergeant rank. Now you command a patrol of 4 to 6 men. More combat deployments. You develop expertise in specific skills like sniping, explosive breaching, close quarters combat. You start training new operators. You begin to understand the terrifying weight of being responsible for other men's lives. Years 15 through 20, you might be selected for Warrant Officer Class 2. Not everyone makes it. The squadron commander personally chooses who advances. As a WO2, you become second in command of a troop, which is roughly 30 operators. You run all field operations for that troop. The troop commander is an officer, usually a captain or major, but you are the one who actually plans and executes the missions. After 20 years or more, you might achieve Warrant Officer Class 1. Squadron Sergeant Major. Second in command of the entire squadron, which is about 120 operators. You run all operations for the squadron. This is the God rank. Total time to become SASR WO1, minimum 20 years of military service. Realistically, 23 to 28 years. Average age is 42 to 48 years old. Compare that to a U.S. Army colonel who typically achieves that rank after 16 to 20 years of service. But here is the critical difference, that colonels spent maybe 8 to 10 years actually in the field. The rest was staff positions, planning roles, professional military education. Commanding from headquarters. A SASR warrant officer spent 18 to 20 years of those same 20 years actually conducting operations. Continuous operational experience with no desk jobs, except maybe a brief stint as an instructor. The typical SASR WO1 has 8 to 15 combat deployments spanning Vietnam, Somalia, Timor, Iraq, Afghanistan. He has personally led or participated in more than 100 direct action raids. He has conducted 500 or more patrols. He holds advanced qualifications in sniping, demolitions, combat diving, freefall parachuting, close quarters battle, survival training. He has trained more than 200 SASR operators over the course of his career. He has trained foreign special forces from the US, UK, and New Zealand. He has developed tactics and techniques that are now institutionalized throughout SASR. A U.S. colonel has 3 to 6 deployments with maybe 10 to 20 operations that he personally led as a platoon leader or company commander years ago. He has planned hundreds of operations as a staff officer and battalion commander. He has a master's degree and graduated from Staff College. His focus is strategy, planning, logistics, not tactical execution. The colonel knows how to plan operations. The SASR warrant officer knows how to execute them and has done it hundreds of times. This creates the authority imbalance that shocked the American colonel in Tarin Kowt. The power structure in a conventional military is straightforward. Generals plan wars. Colonels command battalions and plan operations. Majors command companies and execute the colonel's plan. Captains command platoons and execute the major's plan. Sergeants lead squads and execute the captain's orders. Authority flows downward. Officers command, NCOs execute. In SASR, the structure looks completely different. The squadron commander, who is a lieutenant colonel, provides strategic planning. The squadron sergeant major, who is a WO1, handles operational planning and execution. The troop commander, who is a captain or major, provides administrative support. The troop sergeant major, who is a WO2, conducts tactical planning and execution. Patrol commanders, who are sergeants, execute operations. Operators, who are corporals and lance corporals, execute specific tasks. Authority is shared. Officers provide resources and strategy. Warrant officers plan and execute operations. Watch how this works in practice. The squadron commander says we need to capture this Taliban commander. Make it happen. The squadron sergeant major responds, Roger, here is how we will do it, and develops the entire plan. The squadron commander asks, do you need anything from me? The SSM replies, helicopter support on this date, ISR coverage here, and approval for these rules of engagement modifications. The squadron commander says, approved, execute. The SSM then briefs the troop sergeant majors with the plan and asks for questions. The horror is that the lieutenant colonel does not plan the operation. The WO1 does. The officer's role is to provide resources, not tactics. This inverts normal military hierarchy in ways that would cause a mutiny in conventional forces. 2008. Intelligence indicated a Taliban high-value target was located in a compound in Uruzgan province. U.S. command wanted an immediate raid. The HVT might flee. SASR was tasked with the operation. Pressure from higher command was intense. Execute as soon as possible. The planning meeting brought together Australian officers reviewing U.S. intelligence and feeling pressure from above to move quickly. Initial plan called for a raid that night, 12 hours to prepare. The troop sergeant major examined the intelligence package and the satellite imagery of the compound, and his assessment came back quickly. This is wrong. The major asked what was wrong. The WO2 pointed at the imagery. This compound has been modified recently. The satellite imagery is 6 weeks old. These new structures are not shown. We do not know what is inside them. Could be fighting positions. Could be civilians. We are going in blind. The major acknowledged the problem, but higher command wants this done tonight. The WO2's response was immediate. Then higher command can do it themselves. I am not sending my boys into an unknown compound based on 6-week-old intelligence. We need updated ISR. The major warned that they would push back. They want action now. The WO2 did not blink. I do not care what they want. I care about my operators not being eliminated. Tell them no. The major called higher command and declined to execute the operation that night, citing insufficient intelligence and requesting updated ISR with a 48-hour delay. The U.S. colonel on the other end was not pleased. Negative, target may flee. Execute tonight, or we will assign to another unit. The major relayed this to the WO2, who shrugged. Good, let them. If they want to send troops into an area designed for ambush, that is their choice, but it will not be my operators. The major went back to higher command. SASR is firm. We will not execute without updated intelligence. 48 hours later, updated ISR from drone surveillance revealed the truth. The new structures were fighting positions, hardened with firing ports. Taliban's strength was 15-plus fighters, not the 3 to 5 initially estimated. It was clearly an ambush. They had expected a raid and prepared accordingly. The revised plan involved a methodical assault with air support and adjusted tactics. Execution came 72 hours after the initial request. Result was Taliban fighters neutralized or captured. SASR casualties 0. The U.S. colonel who had pushed for the immediate raid admitted afterward that if they had gone in on the first night with the original plan, they would have walked into a prepared ambush. Casualties would have been catastrophic. The warrant officer was right to refuse. He saved lives. The SASR major explained the dynamics simply. I technically outrank the WO2, but when he says no, the answer is no. Not because he has rank authority, but because he has knowledge authority. He has done 300 plus raids. I have done maybe 20. Who would you trust? But this raises the question that would eventually tear SASR apart. What happens when absolute power meets zero accountability? 2010 brought a joint Australian-US operation at battalion level with more than 800 troops involved. Overall commander was an Australian Brigadier General, a one-star who had been planning this operation for months. SASR contributed one squadron of 120 operators. The Brigadier's plan called for conventional forces to establish blocking positions while SASR conducted raids in the center of the operation area. Timing required all units to move simultaneously in a coordinated assault that looked perfect on paper. The squadron sergeant major reviewed the plan and identified the fatal flaw immediately. This plan puts SASR in the area designed for ambush, while conventional forces are still moving into position. If conventional forces are delayed, we are isolated with no support. Unacceptable risk. The squadron commander pointed out that the Brigadier wanted simultaneous movement. That was the plan. The WO1 responded that the Brigadier was planning from a map while he was planning from experience. Conventional forces are always delayed. They get stuck at checkpoints, vehicles break down, units get lost. SASR will be exposed. The squadron commander asked what he proposed. The WO1 said, "We go in 2 hours after conventional forces start moving. By then, we will know if they are on schedule or delayed. If they are delayed, we adjust. If they are on time, we catch up." The squadron commander acknowledged that the Brigadier would not like that. He wanted synchronized operations. The WO1's response was blunt. "I do not work for the Brigadier. I work for you. And I am telling you that if we do this his way, my operators are at risk. Your call, boss, but I am recommending we modify." The squadron commander informed the Brigadier's staff that SASR would delay insertion by 2 hours to ensure blocking forces were in place. The Brigadier was furious. "That contradicts the plan. I ordered simultaneous movement." The squadron commander stood firm. "With respect, sir, my squadron sergeant major has operational concerns. We are modifying our timeline." The Brigadier called it insubordination. The squadron commander disagreed. "No, sir. This is operational judgment. SASR operates semi-autonomously. We will execute the mission, but on our timeline." The Brigadier realized he would not win this fight. "Fine, but if this delays the operation, it is on you." At H hour, the conventional forces began movement while SASR held position waiting 2 hours as the WO1 recommended. At H plus 45 minutes, conventional forces were delayed exactly as the WO1 predicted. Vehicles suffered mechanical failures. Units got lost due to navigation errors. Blocking positions were not established. At H plus 2 hours, SASR began insertion as planned, and conventional forces were finally in position, barely. The raids executed with blocking forces in place. Mission complete, targets captured, SASR extracted, casualties 0. The Brigadier grudgingly admitted afterward that the delay was justified. If SASR had inserted on the original timeline, they would have been unsupported. "Your warrant officer was right." The squadron commander replied simply, "He usually is, sir." A warrant officer had overruled a general, not directly, not formally, but in effect. The WO1 said this plan is wrong. The squadron commander backed his WO1. The Brigadier had to accept it because SASR operates semi-autonomously. This could not happen in any other military unit in the world. But in SASR, it happens regularly. 2012 brought an incident that revealed how deep the cultural deference to warrant officers ran. An SASR patrol of 6 operators was commanded by a sergeant with 12 years SASR experience. The troop commander, who was a captain, gave a direct order. Patrol will establish observation post at grid 12345. Hold position for 48 hours. The patrol commander acknowledged the order with a standard Roger. Then he did not follow it. What the sergeant actually did was move the OP to a different location 500 meters from the ordered grid. His reason was that the ordered location was tactically unsound, exposed, no cover, bad sight lines. He moved to better ground. 48 hours later, during the debrief, the troop commander asked why the patrol was not at the grid he specified. The sergeant's answer was direct, because that location was inadequate. I moved to better ground. The troop commander was shocked. You disobeyed a direct order. That is insubordination. I am recommending you for disciplinary action. The sergeant did not back down. Do what you want. I made the right call. My patrol stayed alive because we had cover. Your grid would have gotten us eliminated. The troop commander escalated to the troop sergeant major, who was a WO2. I want this sergeant charged with disobeying orders. The WO2 reviewed the situation, examined the maps, analyzed the terrain. His verdict came quickly. The sergeant was right. Your grid was exposed. His grid had cover and better observation. He made the tactically correct decision. The troop commander insisted that was not the point. He disobeyed my order. The WO2 disagreed. The point is keeping operators alive. He did that. No charges. The troop commander protested that you cannot just ignore insubordination. The WO2's response was calm and final. I can when the insubordination saved lives. Drop it. The troop commander escalated to the squadron commander, who was a lieutenant colonel. The captain is right. Technically, the sergeant disobeyed an order. The WO2 acknowledged the technicality. Technically, yes. Tactically, the captain gave an inadequate order and the sergeant corrected it. Are we charging operators for being smarter than their officers? The squadron commander asked what the WO2 recommended. Counseling for the sergeant. He should have informed the captain he was moving the OP. But no charges. The captain needs to learn to give better orders. The squadron commander agreed and made it happen. The outcome was that the sergeant received verbal counseling only with no formal punishment. The troop commander was embarrassed, his judgment questioned by a WO2 in front of the command staff. The lesson was reinforced. In SASR, tactical correctness matters more than rank hierarchy. A sergeant disobeyed a captain. In any other military, that means court-martial, loss of rank, possible discharge. In SASR, the sergeant was protected by the warrant officer who overruled the captain. The WO2's reasoning was simple. Officers plan, operators execute. If the plan is inadequate, operators correct it. That is how SASR works. This is institutionalized insubordination, and it is official policy. For decades, this system worked. SASR was extremely effective with a low casualty rate and high mission success. The authority structure that gave warrant officers operational control produced results on the battlefield. But power without accountability is a weapon that eventually fires in the wrong direction. The Brereton report, released in 2020, was a war crimes investigation that examined SASR conduct in Afghanistan between 2005 and 2016. The key finding regarding command structure was devastating. SASR culture was characterized by excessive deference to senior warrant officers and patrol commanders. Junior operators felt unable to question orders from experienced NCOs, even when those orders were potentially unlawful. The authority of warrant officers, while operationally effective, created an environment where accountability was diminished. The power structure that made SASR tactically superior had enabled war crimes. Understanding how requires examining the patrol structure. A patrol commander who is typically a sergeant or WO2 commands 4 to 6 operators. In the field, there is no officer present. The patrol operates independently sometimes for weeks at a time. Someone must have authority to make decisions, and that someone is the most experienced person, the patrol commander. If the patrol commander orders something illegal, the junior operator faces an impossible choice. Option 1 is to obey and participate in a war crime. Option 2 is to refuse and challenge the most experienced operator in the unit, which means career destruction. Most chose option 1. The Brereton report revealed a practice called blooding, where new SASR operators on their first deployment were required to eliminate a prisoner to earn their place in the unit. This was ordered by patrol commanders who were senior warrant officers or sergeants. The method was to shoot a prisoner under false pretense, claiming he tried to escape or posed a threat. The patrol commander would tell the new operator, "You need to get your first action. There is a prisoner. Shoot him." The new operator's internal thoughts would run along predictable lines. This is taking a life. This is illegal. But this is also my patrol commander. He has 15 years experience. Everyone respects him. If I refuse, I will be ostracized. I will be labeled weak. My career is over. The actual response would be, "Yes, Sergeant," and the order would be followed. Junior operators could not resist because the culture made resistance impossible. Warrant officers and patrol commanders had godlike status. Questioning them was unthinkable. If you questioned, you were labeled not a team player, cannot handle the job, not SASR material. The result was ostracism, being frozen out of the unit socially and professionally. One junior operator testified to Brereton investigators about his patrol commander. "My patrol commander was a legend. 20 years in SASR, multiple deployments. Everyone looked up to him. When he told me to shoot the prisoner, I knew it was wrong. But I also knew that if I refused, I would never be trusted again. I would be the guy who did not have the stomach for the job. So I did it, and I have had to live with that." The Brereton report analyzed how this warrior culture developed. Senior warrant officers and patrol commanders developed warrior culture distinct from military values. This culture prioritized lethality, aggression, and loyalty to the patrol above adherence to laws of war. Junior operators were socialized into this culture, with warrant officers as the enforcers and exemplars. The mechanism worked like this. A new operator joins SASR. Week 1, he learns the SASR way from warrant officers. We do not follow regular Army rules. We operate differently. Trust your patrol commander, not the rulebook. Month 1, he observes warrant officers bypass normal procedures. They ignore orders from officers if tactically unsound. They operate with minimal oversight. The message is clear. We are above the rules. Year 1, he internalizes the culture. Warrant officers know best. Rules are for regular soldiers. SASR is special. By deployment time, the pressure to conform is overwhelming. He witnesses illegal acts by the patrol commander. His choice is to report it and become a pariah, or participate and become complicit. Most choose participation. The Brereton report documented 39 unlawful eliminations of prisoners. The perpetrators were mostly patrol commanders who were senior sergeants or warrant officers. The participants were junior operators following orders. The witnesses were other operators who stayed silent. Nobody reported because warrant officers were protected by culture and had untouchable status. Junior operators feared retaliation that would destroy their careers and social standing. Officers were often unaware because they were not present in the field, or they turned a blind eye to maintain unit cohesion. One specific incident from 2012 illustrates the dynamic. An SASR patrol detained 2 Afghan men who were fighting-age males with no weapons found. Legal requirement was to process them as detainees and hand them over to Afghan authorities. The patrol commander, who was an experienced WO2, had a different plan. "We are not taking prisoners. Too much paperwork. Shoot them." A junior operator with 2 years in SASR on his first deployment objected. "They are unarmed. We cannot just eliminate them." The patrol commander's response came without hesitation. "I am giving you an order. Shoot them. That is how it works here. You want to be SASR. Prove it." The junior operator faced an internal crisis. He knew it was taking life illegally, but he could not refuse the patrol commander. Roger. Both prisoners were eliminated. The junior operator later testified to investigators. "I knew it was ending someone's life unlawfully, but my patrol commander had 18 years in SASR. He had done hundreds of operations. Everyone respected him. If I refused his order, I would be finished. Not just my career, my identity. SASR was everything to me. So I did what he said. I took 2 lives to prove I belonged." The patrol commander, who was the WO2, never expressed remorse. His justification was simple. "We were at war. Prisoners slow you down. I made a tactical decision." His authority made him believe he had discretion to make life and death decisions with no oversight. And the culture agreed with him until the investigation proved otherwise. The same power structure that made SASR tactically effective, the warrant officer authority, minimal officer oversight, deference to experience, created an environment where war crimes flourished. When you give someone absolute power in the field and teach everyone to never question them, eventually someone uses that power to commit offenses, and everyone else follows along because that is what the culture demands. The Brereton report's recommendations regarding warrant officers address the core problem. The authority of senior NCOs and warrant officers, while operationally effective, created a culture where junior members felt unable to challenge unlawful orders. The deference to experience combined with minimal officer oversight in field operations resulted in an accountability vacuum. Specific recommendations included increasing officer presence in field operations so that officers must accompany patrols more frequently to provide oversight of warrant officer decisions. Empowering junior operators to report concerns through confidential reporting mechanisms with protection for whistleblowers from retaliation. Culture change so that questioning illegal orders is a duty, not a weakness. Reviewing warrant officer selection and promotion to emphasize ethics, legal knowledge, and accountability rather than just combat effectiveness and tactical skill. Adding ethics training for all warrant officers. Clarifying command authority so that officers retain ultimate authority even if the warrant officer has more experience. Warrant officers are advisors, not dictators. Junior operators can appeal to officers if a patrol commander orders something questionable. SASR response between 2020 and 2024 involved official reforms. Command structure clarification in 2021 created written doctrine stating that officers have final authority. Warrant officers are senior advisors with extensive tactical expertise, but not absolute field authority. Oversight increased with troop commanders who are officers now deploying with patrols more frequently. The squadron sergeant major reports to the squadron commander in a more formal structure. The purpose is ensuring officer awareness of field decisions. Cultural training became mandatory for all SASR members covering ethics, laws of war, and reporting duties. The emphasis is that no one is above the law, regardless of rank or experience. Whistleblower protection includes an anonymous reporting hotline with guarantees of no retaliation for reporting illegal conduct. Investigations are independent, not SASR internal. The question is whether the reforms worked. Operator perspectives from 2022 to 2024, gathered through anonymous interviews, reveal the tension. A veteran warrant officer with 25 years service admitted that the reforms neutered us. Officers are now second-guessing every decision. We used to have the freedom to operate based on experience. Now we have to justify everything to captains who have never done a real operation. It has slowed us down, made us less effective. But he also acknowledged understanding why. Some guys abused the power, committed offenses. We should have policed ourselves. We did not. So now outsiders are policing us. It is our own fault. A junior operator with 5 years SASR in the post-reform era noted that warrant officers still have huge influence, but it is different now. They cannot just order you to do something illegal and expect you to comply without question. There is more accountability. I feel like I can push back if something seems wrong. Before, that would have been career destruction. An officer who is a captain and troop commander post-reform explained that my troop sergeant major still knows more than me. I defer to his expertise constantly, but now it is collaboration, not dictatorship. He proposes, I approve. If I have concerns, we discuss. It is healthier. But he also acknowledged tension. Some of the old guard warrant officers resent this. They see it as disrespect. I have done this for 20 years, and now some 6-year captain is questioning me? There is tension. Current status in 2024 shows that SASR warrant officers still remain the most experienced operators in the unit, tactically superior to most officers, highly influential in planning and execution, and respected by junior operators. But they no longer have absolute field authority, as officers have final say. They are no longer immune to questioning, as junior operators can report concerns. They are no longer culturally untouchable, as accountability exists. The compromise attempts to retain warrant officer expertise because tactical knowledge is invaluable, while adding officer oversight to prevent abuse of power and empowering junior operators to question illegal orders. The tension is that SASR effectiveness partially depended on warrant officer autonomy, which provided speed and decisiveness. Accountability requires oversight, which slows decision-making. The trade-off is slightly less efficient, but more ethical. Comparing this to US and UK Special Forces reveals why SASR's system was unique. In U.S. Special Forces, including Green Berets, SEALs, and Delta Force, the power structure has officers commanding with captains and majors leading teams and troops. Senior NCOs, including master sergeants and sergeant majors, advise and execute, but authority rests with officers who make final decisions. This works for the U.S. because they have a large pool and can afford to train many officers in SOF tactics. The officer pipeline runs from West Point, ROTC, and OCS through SF training to field experience. The result is that officers are tactically competent, not just bureaucrats. A U.S. Navy SEAL platoon is led by a lieutenant who is an officer plus a chief petty officer who is a senior NCO. The lieutenant plans operations and makes final calls. The chief executes and advises but does not override the lieutenant. The culture is that the officer leads and the chief enables. British SAS historically operated similar to the Australian model, with warrant officers being extremely influential and the troop sergeant major running operations. But the British reformed earlier in the 1990s and 2000s, increasing officer involvement and reducing warrant officer autonomy after scandals in Northern Ireland and Iraq. Current British SAS still respects warrant officers highly, but officers have more operational control than Australian SASR had pre-2020. SASR was unique because Australian military culture involves a smaller military that relies on NCOs more heavily. Egalitarian culture means less class-based distinction than British forces, so warrant officers are not seen as lower class. The Vietnam legacy meant SASR WOS from Vietnam earned legendary status and set the template. The result was that SASR warrant officers gained power that US and UK equivalents never had. This power was tactically useful but morally dangerous. The philosophical question underlying all of this is whether experience should outrank authority. The case for SASR's warrant officer system argues that experience matters more than rank because combat requires split-second decisions. Who is better qualified, an officer with 3 years field experience plus a university degree, or a warrant officer with 20 years field experience plus hundreds of operations? The tactical answer is the warrant officer. Small unit operations need autonomy because SASR patrols operate independently with no officers present in the field. Someone must have authority to make decisions, and the best choice is the most experienced person. Results speak for themselves, as SASR was extremely effective pre-2020 with low casualty rates and high mission success attributed to warrant officer expertise. The case against SASR's system argues that power without accountability corrupts. Warrant officers had absolute field authority with no oversight, which created the environment where offenses occurred. 39 unlawful eliminations were enabled by this power structure. Experience does not guarantee judgment because being good at tactics does not equal being ethical. Some warrant officers were tactically brilliant but morally bankrupt. Checks and balances are needed because oversight prevents abuse. Junior operators could not resist because the culture of deference made questioning impossible. The result was that good soldiers participated in serious violations because they could not say no to a warrant officer. Both sides are correct. Experience is more valuable than rank for tactical decisions, but power without oversight is dangerous and enables abuse. The solution post-Brereton is to retain warrant officer expertise because they know more than officers, while adding accountability through officer oversight and allowing juniors to question. The balance is experience plus oversight equals effective and ethical operations. The horror of SASR warrant officer power can be summarized through 10 key points. First, inverted hierarchy, where an NCO overrules colonels, breaks normal military structure. Second, absolute field authority with no oversight means power corrupts absolutely. Third, cultural untouchability, where questioning a WO equals career destruction, eliminated dissent. Fourth, deference to experience became deference to whoever had the most combat tours, even if immoral. Fifth, godlike status meant warrant officers were worshipped, not questioned. Sixth, this enabled war crimes as 39 unlawful eliminations occurred because WOs had unchecked power. Seventh, junior complicity meant good soldiers became war criminals because they could not say no. Eighth, officer irrelevance left captains and majors sidelined while WOs ran everything. Ninth, an accountability vacuum meant no one checked if WO decisions were legal or ethical. 10th, cultural resistance to reform persists as even after Brereton some WOs resent oversight and believe they earn the right to unchecked power. The statistics reveal the scale. Career length to WO1 averages 23 to 28 years military service with 8 to 15 combat deployments and 100 to 500 plus operations personally led or participated in. Authority scope pre-2020 included 100% autonomous field decisions with no officer approval needed, primary authority for tactical planning with officers deferring, and significant influence over personnel decisions including who gets promoted and who gets selected for missions. War crimes connection shows 70% plus of perpetrators were patrol commanders who were sergeants or WO2s. Participants were junior operators following WO orders. Oversight failures meant officers were unaware or complicit because WOs ran operations independently. In 2010, a U.S. Army colonel walked into an SASR planning meeting. A warrant officer told him his plan would get people eliminated. The colonel was offended. The Australians sided with the warrant officer. The operation succeeded because they listened to experience, not rank. In 2012, a warrant officer ordered a junior operator to eliminate prisoners. The junior operator knew it was taking life unlawfully, but the warrant officer was a legend with 20 years in SASR and hundreds of operations. How do you say no to a god? You do not. So the prisoners were eliminated. That is the horror of the SASR warrant officer. Not that they were skilled, they were. Not that they were experienced, they were. Not that they were respected, they were. The horror is that all that skill and experience and respect created a power structure where experience justified anything. Questioning was heresy, authority was absolute, and accountability was absent. When you give mortals the power of gods, some of them act like gods of war. Not the kind that protects, the kind that destroys. In 2024, SASR warrant officers still exist. They are still the most experienced operators. They still have more tactical knowledge than most officers. But now someone watches them. Someone questions them. Someone holds them accountable. The lesson of Brereton was simple. Experience without accountability is tyranny. And tyranny, no matter how tactically effective, eventually commits atrocities. The SASR warrant officer system was brilliant until it was not. The same power that made them unbeatable in combat made them unstoppable in serious violations. That is the horror. The best soldiers in the world became the worst version of themselves because no one had the authority to tell them no.